Warning: this video may contain spoilers for movies you may or may not have watched. Proceed with caution. In 1994, tensions arose at Walt Disney Studios between former CEO of the company Michael Eisner and film producer Jeffrey Katzenberg. When Eisner refused to grant Katzenberg a promotion to a vacated president position, the latter ultimately resigned from Disney and teamed up with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen to start up a brand new animation studio. Out would come DreamWorks SKG. As of 2023, the animation division of DreamWorks has released 45 animated feature films in theaters, some of which are known for making fun of Disney in comedic or aesthetic ways. Seeing as how DreamWorks is responsible for highly successful franchises such as Shrek, Kung Fu Panda, and How to Train Your Dragon, I decided to take a look at the rest of their filmography just like I did with Disney last year, and I think it's time that I make a video where I rank all of DreamWorks animated movies from worst to best. There are quite a few factors and nitpicks that could play into how I'm gonna be ranking these, but above all, it will come down to simply how much I enjoy them over one another. Also note that this ranking will only have theatrical releases, meaning that we won't be talking about Joseph King of Dreams or Troll Hunters Rise of the Titans. I bet you didn't know they existed. I hope you enjoy hearing my opinions, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. So with that said, let's begin the watch party. 45. The Boss Baby. Right out of the gate, you'll expect the overdone trope of a child living the perfect life, with parents who engage in all of his imaginations, and then it all changes when a new member arrives to the family. Once this happens, Tim's parents become so aggravatingly annoying. It also seems that this movie is obsessed with baby ass, and there is even a drool scene. All of this is pretty uncomfortable and borderline gross to look at. The first time I watched this movie, they made me flinch. I do think that Tim and the baby developed a great brotherly relationship, but the aforementioned elements and ridiculous humor just brings down the experience for me massively. Compared to the overall great catalog of movies that DreamWorks has to offer, that's enough to place The Boss Baby as the worst movie on the list. Also, is that Chatterphone from Toy Story 3? 44. Home. Also known as Happy Smack Day. Seriously, why they didn't pick that title instead of settling for a single generic word is beyond me. Anyways, this one is all over the place. The soundtrack is quite nice, but the plot was just really messy and uncompelling. Plus, the character designs are not great and the cast choices are even more odd. It's like, yay, I loved listening to a teenage girl being voiced by a popular singer and Sheldon Cooper talking in gibberish English. This movie was released in 2015, the same year that Pixar brought us Inside Out. It does not compare. During my whole watch through, I actually struggled to come up with a title better than Home, and I think the filmmakers also felt sad mad about that. 43. Monsters vs. Aliens. There is a strong foundation for this movie to handle, but it's squandered by making the monsters clumsy, bastardizing the humor and having distractions so insane you don't know how to feel, such as the president playing Axel F in front of an alien. It's not just the song choice, but also the setting that just makes it so ridiculous. None of this mixes well with the flow of the plot or the action where the animation really shines through. That's pretty much the strong point of the movie. It's still the most expensive production ever from DreamWorks, and it shows. There was supposedly going to be a sequel to this movie, but it wasn't successful enough. On another note, Galaxar as a villain wasn't all that interesting, and I'm iffy on the voice acting. 42. The Boss Baby 2 Family Business. I'm honestly surprised this is marginally better than its predecessor, considering the rating downgrade. It's not nearly as annoying and gross, but that is not saying a lot because this sequel's flaw is in its plot and premises, which are quite frankly a catastrophic mess. Maybe it's a bad idea to watch all the films on this list only one time before ranking them, as I feel like I don't have the required attention span to really enjoy this one. Either that, or I'm not that amused at the fact this became a franchise. Albeit, the animation is great, the portion during the climax surrounding Tabitha Solo was a lot of fun, and the message of reconnecting after you've grown apart is pretty sweet, but it's just the fact that it's drowned out in a lot of nonsense. 41. Ants. DreamWorks' first animated film. A humble beginning. Obviously, it's very much comparable to Pixar's A Bug's Life. They both came out in 1998 and they're both centered on insects, but I think I like that one more. This one is decent but nothing extraordinary. It shows that DreamWorks was still trying to find its footing and first tried to imitate a Disney storyline. The designs of the worker ants remind me of E.T., which actually kinda makes sense because Steven Spielberg was involved in the founding of the studio. I mean, you can't tell me C doesn't look like E.T., does he? 40. Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Everyone's a dog now? For whatever reason, I find that connotation pretty disturbing. Not just when Penny was bullying Sherman and he bites her in the arm as a form of self-defense, but also towards the end when he gives into it to tell Miss Grunion off, and all historical figures traveled into the present going along with it. It just seems like a fancy schmancy way to say that you're an animal if you're a decent person, without a middle ground. Other than that, the time traveling in this movie is fascinating. History comes alive and it's so sweet to see the two kids start getting along. 39. Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas. The final nail in the coffin for hand-drawn animated films by DreamWorks. At this point, it was clear they needed to distinguish themselves from Disney and instead pursue mocking them like they're known for nowadays. As for the movie itself, it is pretty entertaining, but not exactly memorable. I hated listening to Sinbad being sexist to Marina by saying that the ship is no place for a woman, and doubling down on that with his behavior. Even more insane is that the two end up falling in love, even though Proteus was already going to marry her, but then the wedding was called off, I guess. The romantic subplot just felt kinda perfunctory. The goddess Ares is also checking plenty of boxes for generic villains. 38. Flushed Away. The last collaboration with Artman, and it's definitely the weakest. It's quite inventive for a sewer setting, but it fails to engage at certain points, and I really think it could have done without all the smacks in the face and hits in the crotch. I wonder how this film would have panned out if it actually was stop motion animated. It wasn't possible because of all the water. 37. Shrek the Third. We can all agree this is the weakest entry in the Shrek franchise, but I also just can't vehemently hate it because of that. It may not be as entertaining to watch and the added characters may not be all that interesting, but it's still decent in its own merit and it has its moments. Scenes that stand out include Shrek's nightmare with all the babies, the bonfire talk with Artie, and in true Disney mockery, Snow White using the animals as weapons. Honestly, I had low expectations and I wasn't that disappointed. 36. Trolls. An infectious musical confection. Without the desperately needed character development, there is toxic positivity from Poppy and her friends, and unlikable negativity from Branch. It's really obnoxious on either front. The message of finding happiness inside of you is kinda sappy, but makes for a feel-good ending. You might find yourself jamming to the tunes while watching, but they'll probably fade from your memory once the movie is done, unless you're a Justin Timberlake fan, I guess. Fun and cute overall though. I've seen plenty of people absolutely bash on this movie and its sequels, which I find superior, for whatever reasons I can't pinpoint. 35. The Croods. Isn't it amusing how, with this being a film released in 2013 that it has this whole end of the world stuff surrounding it, I always say to myself, the world doesn't end, as much as any plot with this narrative would want to tell you. The world just changes. Outside of this, I would say the movie was executed pretty well for the primitive plot's worth. Hearing Nicolas Cage portray a screaming caveman is a lot of fun, and he does a fantastic job at giving life to a deeper character than just that. The humor is pretty good, but sometimes a little too padded. 34. Shark Tale.
I like big butts and I cannot lie.
Lamau. I am among the group that actually enjoyed this one. It starts out slow, but picks up once the anchor instant happens and it becomes a fun watch. Will Smith's portrayal of Oscar does get a little irritating and the character designs may be flat out horrific and uglier than sin, but looking past those flaws, this is a well-told original tale that does not necessarily have to be compared to Finding Nemo. Lenny is also a very endearing character. 33. Trolls Band Together. This movie came out in my country 3 weeks before its North American release, so I got to watch it early. It does a serviceable job in expanding the Trolls lore, but other than that there is not much new to offer in this third installment. If you're a mega Trolls fan and want to get your musical and eye-popping visual fix, I would recommend it, but be warned. It might just be me, but I found Poppy exceptionally annoying compared to the other two movies. Also, the main villain is portrayed by Amy Schumer, how appropriate. 32. Trolls World Tour. To start off, this doesn't have much to do with the movie itself, but during the intro you can see an arrangement of all DreamWorks movies released before this one to commemorate 25 years of the company. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, the visuals are even easier on the eyes and the music choices are especially wild and creative. They give you songs from various genres, set to various moods, all in the name of celebrating our differences. But that's what I feel like Trolls Band Together didn't do a lot with, giving this one the edge. Even though I would consider this the definitive Trolls movie, I could also understand the perspective of all these songs appearing one after another to try to pander to the audience, which is why I put this movie and pretty much the other ones this relatively low in the ranking. Maybe that is the reason people hate them, but I just don't have that much of a problem. 31. Spirit Untamed. This movie was heavily panned and forgotten, so again, I didn't have high expectations. It was a solid and entertaining watch about a girl and her horse. It turns out that all the hate comes from how this whole thing is just a repeat of the first couple episodes of Spirit Riding Free, which is a TV series you can watch on Netflix. but I was exposed to the movie first, so it didn't really matter. I don't know how the characters are supposed to behave or how the plot points are supposed to go, so even though I did enjoy this movie quite a bit, I think placing it around here on the ranking makes sense. It's also worth noting that this is not a sequel to the other Spirit film, which we will get to in a bit. It's a 3D animated spin-off, but I'm sure you can decide which is a better one. 30. B-movie. I like jazz. I first heard of this movie in late 2016 when it became a meme somehow, and watching it like 6 years later, I can say that it has an engaging sting. The idea of a talking bee becoming friends with a human is odd but compelling. I was interested in how the whole trial would go and the repercussions for winning it. Unfortunately, this movie just didn't have a lot of grip on my memory after. Oh, and the obnoxious bee jokes, gotta have those. 29. Penguins of Madagascar. There is something oddly infectious about a group of penguins with a military personality. As you know, this spins off the mainline Madagascar films, and while it doesn't quite match up to them, it's still very enjoyable. I do feel like the movie cannot seem to focus on what it wants to be or what it wants to tell. We know that Private, the most adorable penguin, wants to feel valued in the team, but the frenetic pacing kinda takes away from that. The characters in the North Wind group are also not that interesting and actually pretty flat. 28. Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. Imagine if a horse told a story and made a movie out of it, that's this. I would say it's an underrated experimental film from DreamWorks. The story is told in a less comedic and more dramatic way, with very little dialogue and no first-hand talking from the horses. The animation and scenery are exemplary for 2002. Everything looks gorgeous. Though I can't say I really cared about the music by Bryan Adams, I much prefer the moments when you can hear Hans Zimmer's score. 27. Rise of the Guardians. A very innocent movie. All the Guardians represent myths and holiday figures and they're all very likable, with solid voice performances. The villainous Pitch especially stands out. He is given a compelling boogeyman personality without being flat out scary, and even his character design is unique. Overall, a rather underrated and imaginative movie that the whole family can enjoy, but tends to have inconsistent pacing, and I feel like the action scenes could have had a bit more. 26. Turbo. Yeah, I guess this is guilty of one of the most unoriginal plots to ever tell, based on an underdog winning a competition, but whenever this is the case, I try to find the appeal in how it's told. The story is about a snail getting a chance to race in the Indy 500 thanks to a freak accident akin to being bit by a radioactive spider, and help from a taco shop owner named Tito. In fact, you might even find yourself rooting for that guy more than Turbo himself, and I'm not saying that out of bias for being Mexican myself. Call me slow, but I really should have caught on sooner to Guy Gagné being the bad guy. Honestly, this movie is pretty good. I don't see that many people praise it. Apparently there's also a series on Netflix based on Turbo and they say it's way better, but that's not what we're here for.
That snail is fat!
25. Madagascar Escape to Africa. The inclusion of I Like to Move It at 7 minutes in got me interested in this one. As the four main characters are each given their own story arcs, it makes the sequel have a tad too much on its plate. We do get to see more of their background and origins this way, which is pretty nice, but ultimately makes for a plot that is not sustainable, and it's clear with the absence of Alex's family in Madagascar 3. I feel like Escape to Africa in particular is the most guilty of being remembered only for the penguins, as their antics and schemes are always super enjoyable. Moto's first scene is well known around the internet, but it disappointed me that I could find more depth in a piece of paper than this wasted character. Overall, not as good as the original, yet serviceable. 24. Over the Hedge. This movie is actually based on a comic strip, so for like the third time in this video I'm going to remain an uncultured swine and not talk about it in any capacity. Oh well, I guess it's no big deal. The idea is that a raccoon has 1 week to gather enough food to pay off an angry bear. And together with a family of forest creatures, they got to avoid an absolutely unhinged neighbor lady who has hired a verminator to hunt them down. The movie is witty in its depictions of a modern lifestyle and pulls out realistic communication when it comes to the message of family. A good portion of the movie is quite slow, but sticking around for the third act makes it all worthwhile. 23. Kung Fu Panda 3. By this point in the franchise, even though there is still awesome entertainment to be had, I feel like the world itself has become diluted. It's a pretty solid sequel with eye-popping animation and visuals, but it's not as intense as the previous two, plus the humor is especially sillier and takes a little away from the experience. It's also like the plot is allowing Po to play on some sort of god mode by stacking kung fu skills between movies and casually creating new villains to fight. If this is where the franchise is headed, I am expecting KFP 4 to be even weaker than this. Wait, what? You can already rate it on IMDb and it started with a 9.0? Huh. To be fair, the first two movies are incredibly difficult to top and I haven't gotten to talk about them yet. 22. Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. This is the first item on this list to have won an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. It is mainly done by Aardman. If I were to do an Aardman ranking video at any point in the future, I would imagine I'd be able to talk about this movie more in depth and rank a little higher for that matter. For now, I will mention that it's a fine offering in stop motion animation, harmless fun to be had, loads of visual gags and detail warranting rewatches, and even a bit of emotion. It's so hard to find a negative thing to say about this movie, yet it's only 22 on the list. Was something missing? Did it just not click? I don't know how to tell you. 21. The Prince of Egypt. Watching this felt like the longest 99 minutes of my life, but it's not even in a terrible way. By the end, you're gonna feel like you have watched a journey of 1,000 years comprised of like 99 sequel parts in just those compact 99 minutes. This was only DreamWorks' second animated movie, and it makes you think they tried to set a precedent for ambitious offerings since the beginning. This movie is very often remembered as a masterpiece because of that, but for me, either the plot is difficult for me to comprehend, or it's more exhausting than entertaining, and that's what holds it back in the ranking. I might just be mentally challenged. Actually, no, I am a person with a lack of religion watching a movie based on a story of the Bible. Oh yeah, makes sense now. 20. Madagascar. A bit of a survival story. A group of animals get shipped to Madagascar, and in a matter of time they realize that one of them is higher on the food chain. This film and the franchise it spawned have a distinct personality in their groovy music choices and amusing zany animation. All the characters are very likable, especially King Julian and the penguins of course. One thing that really stood out to me was this part with the crazy effects. You don't see this kind of stuff a lot with Hollywood movies, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. To add to the impact, you see that same sequence less than a minute later but faster. Exquisite. 19. The Road to El Dorado. Often mistaken for a Disney creation, and it's the finest hand-drawn animated movie from the anti-Disney. Once Miguel and Tulio arrive to El Dorado, they instantly become legendary and must pretend to be gods until they can gather lots of gold and go back to Spain. The two are a very likable duo, and their voice casts displayed great chemistry with each other. Funny dialogue, snappy jokes, and comedy is always delivered at just the right moments. It's a shame how negatively it was received on release. Obviously not every movie from DreamWorks was going to be like The Prince of Egypt. 18. Shrek 2. I'm on the side of people preferring the original, at least on the witness and humor side of things, but I can totally understand if you prefer this one. Here we have more appearances of fairy tale characters, with Puss in Boots debuting as a fantastic choice for a new main character. The conflict of this movie is based on the clash between an ogre and human royalty, which was bound to happen after what the first movie did. To this day, this sequel is actually still the most financially successful movie from DreamWorks. The day they could reach the $1 billion film club will be legendary if it ever happens. 17. Puss in Boots. Oh look, the character I just mentioned a moment ago has a spin-off of his own. This one does not rely on Shrek at all for its own success, and that's a great thing. The plot is okay at best and kinda small for its grand scale, but there's a lot of strength to make it work. Antonio Banderas is really charismatic as Puss in Boots. The visuals and animation plus the score are all brilliant, and I was even compelled to give a crap about our mainstream artist, Lady Gaga's Americano, which is such a banger to end the movie with. All the kitties seen near the beginning are adorable too. Humpty Dumpty's character though is really confusing, at least when you watch this movie for the first time. First he betrays Puss, then he sets him up with the golden goose for cliched revenge, and finally is convinced to still be a good egg only to die. And he was a golden egg the whole time? Something about him just seems so inconsistent. Anyway, as a final thing to add, did you know that the guy who voiced the old cat, Bob Persichetti, was also one of the directors of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse? Who would have thought? 16. Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken. For all this movie's faults, including scenes not having enough time to breathe, and Connor's ghastly character design, but especially in its highly questionable writing decisions regarding who Chelsea is, it still clicked, more than it should have. I couldn't bring myself to rate this any lower than a 9 out of 10. Overall, it's just so cute. It really is disappointing that Ruby and Chelsea couldn't be BFFs, and it's even worse that the trailer spoiled it from the beginning, but just imagine what it could have been if Narissa actually was a completely different mermaid. Maybe that's what the writers intended for you to do. All the fan art you see on the internet about the two girls was part of the plan. In terms of the plot, imagine if DreamWorks and Pixar were tasked to make their own coming-of-age stories centered on teenage girls who turn into giant monsters when going through intense emotions, and their mothers had strict rules for the family. Pixar responded with Turning Red, and DreamWorks over here responded with Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken. I think most of you can say Pixar did it better, but this is still not bad. In fact, it is so open to interpretation for what Ruby and Chelsea could do, and it wouldn't even feel out of place. And I believe that's what puts this movie this relatively high on the list. Forget about its box office performance and forget about its low rating numbers. This movie will have a cult following for years to come. 15. Shrek Forever After. I am impressed at the fact this surpassed Shrek 2. After the misfire that was Shrek the Third, the reputation of the Shrek franchise plummeted, banishing Shrek Forever After into underrated territory. This was DreamWorks' 20th animated movie, and I believe this was only the first time they finally tried making a story with an emotional focus to tug on your heartstrings like Pixar would do. The movie is also tonally dark. Shrek has to fall in love all over again with a Fiona from an alternate universe to get back to his home universe and reverse his mistake from his children's birthday party. This might ultimately sound like a rehash of the first Shrek movie, but the dark tone and the emotion is why people say this is the true third Shrek movie. A proper follow-up if Prince Charming wasn't still there to be dealt with in Shrek the Third. I imagine this could have been perfect if the humor was as witty as back when the franchise was fresh, and if some of the moments weren't downplayed, but you know, you can't have it all. 14. The Croods: A New Age. Joel Crawford's direction massively elevates this sequel above the original, making it so much more engaging, hilarious, satisfying and visually dazzling. And all the silly end-of-the-world stuff is reduced to a scar on Eve's arm, which is a relief. It's just a shame that in order to do this, it has to deviate a lot from what the original movie established, eliminating the reason to watch that one. It also does take a while to get into the issue with the bananas, which is the biggest driving force of the movie, but once it does, you're in for loads of fun. I can say for sure this is one of the most underrated movies in the whole list. 13. Captain Underpants, the first epic movie. Imaginative, hilarious and great fun. You don't need to be familiar with the book series to enjoy it, but to remain faithful to the source material, the movie is self-aware, breaks the fourth wall very often and establishes the rules spontaneously. Principal Crop is hypnotized by a ring from a cereal box, which turns him into Captain Underpants, then turns back into Crop when hit with water, and then back to tra-la-la again with the snap of a finger. The film maintains a hyperactive energy all the way through, which means there never will be a moment where you feel bored. The toilet humor could drive audiences away, but it works and over time you learn to embrace it anyway. 12. Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. This is an absolutely enjoyable movie. It moves at an energetic pace. It actually has a much more solid plot, allowing for a crazy chaotic adventure. Vitaly and the other new characters are great, and overall it's just so much fun. The song choices are also the best, and not only do we hear I Like to Move It once again, but mixing it with the infectious circus afro for the credits personifies everything that happened in the whole film. On top of that, the theme of coming back to an old home but feeling sad about it allowed for a bit of an emotional scene between all the animals, which is one of the last things I expected from a Madagascar movie, but it was incredibly memorable. Then, it's also their old home where they finally managed to take care of Officer Chantal Dubois, who is one of, if not the most relentless villain of any DreamWorks movie. Every time she gets a scene you want her to seize, and having her ultimately get shipped all the way to Madagascar along with her henchmen as a nod to the first movie made it all the more satisfying and hilarious. If there is any criticism I can give to this movie is that it's lazy with the transitions. You're expected to believe everyone's getting from one distant location to the next without much effort. I mean, they go from Southern Africa all the way to Monte Carlo, then they get from Rome to London, assuming there are train rails overseas. Oh yeah, the English Channel and the Strait of Dover. And then they cross the entire Atlantic Ocean to get to New York City. I guess the movie is so unhinged that you don't care about the plot holes. 11. Chicken Run. This is more dramatic than Wallace and Gromit. The claymation is impressive and it's where all that hard work paid off the most. The premise is pretty simple. All the chickens want to escape the farm, and first they try consulting with the quote-unquote flying rooster, and then they use Mr. Tweedy's tools to build a flying contraption. The writing is meticulous and the mostly female voice cast is excellent. Not just our heroes, but the villains are all great characters too. 10. Shrek. This was the movie that really put DreamWorks on the map. It's where they really went ham with making fun of Disney with every fairy tale character they threw in. In fact, you would need to rewatch it several times to catch them all. Luckily, the comedic genius, the adult-oriented humor and themes, and the exciting adventure allow for infinite replay value and they never get old. It's also important to mention that the villain Lord Farquaad was designed to look exactly like Michael Eisner, the guy at Disney who wronged Jeffrey Katzenberg. This movie just represents DreamWorks perfectly and it deserves having made it to the Library of Congress. 9. How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World. 8. How to Train Your Dragon, and 7. How to Train Your Dragon 2. Now, why are all three of them appearing next to each other on the list? Because they're all the same. How to Train Your Dragon is a huge beloved franchise with very deep lore that I'm not ready to get into in this video. So I'm going to take a more efficient approach and mention only the most important aspects from each movie that determine their order. The first movie was an animation accomplishment. It has Hiccup getting along with Toothless for the first time, which is so sweet, and it also has a very intense climax. Pretty simple movie on a grander scale. The second movie expands a lot on the established world and also has action stuff just as intense, but is tonally darker. Hiccup finally meets his mother after 20 years, but soon after he suffers a tragic loss and now must become chief of Berk. The third movie explores a hidden world that the late Stoic talked about when Hiccup was a boy, and another Night Fury is finally discovered. The end contains a big send-off for the whole trilogy, but the action in this movie is weaker. So, all in all, the entire trilogy is consistently great and DreamWorks' finest, followed by Kung Fu Panda. Oh yeah, and Astrid is so pretty. 6. The Bad Guys. If you want to make a heist movie and really put your heart and soul into it, The Bad Guys is the result. Lovable characters with brilliant voice acting and a good message. The story is very sophisticated and cleverly written, taking into account how thick the plot gets, and the dynamic animation is so enjoyable to see. This is an excellent way to explore these all too familiar themes, and by the end you are left satisfied. If you're looking for a fun time, this movie is a great pick. Plus, I wouldn't mind seeing a sequel in the future. 5. Kung Fu Panda 2. A brilliant follow-up that explores Po's origins, and he has to defeat the villain who was there at the time to take everything from him. The movie maintains the heart and soul of its predecessor that KFP3 kinda lacked later on, and takes what worked in the original and improves upon it, mainly the non-stop action and deadlier missions. The snippets with the 2D animation are also a neat touch, and add to the stirring feel of Po's memories. Inner Peace is a hardcore skill. 4. Abominable. An unexpected masterpiece. The warm nature of the movie, the wonderful characters, the heartfelt story, and the violent set pieces won me over. The Yeti is adorable. His magic powers are fascinating. He has the personality of a fun-loving lad. What's not to like? The entire journey through China and Chinese culture to get him back home feels so real. And it just so happens that Yi's father wanted to visit all the places we see in the film. I know, freak coincidences, but if it means killing 2 birds with 1 stone, I'm all for it. Watch this movie if you still have doubts. You're going to experience many feelings here. 3. Kung Fu Panda. Exemplary kung fu film for the entire family. The humor here is the funniest of the trilogy, and it's entertainment at its purest form. Po's training with Master Shifu is one of the greatest moments ever in cinema, and the final fight with Tai Lung is mad exhilarating. Not only does he carry the movie, but Tai Lung was the coolest villain in the entire franchise. Changed my mind. 2. Megamind. One of the most engaging, deep, and smartest superhero movies ever. Megamind defeats his arch nemesis very early into the movie, but it wasn't going to stop there. He decides to create a new superhero of his own to fight, but turns out to be a supervillain, and must assume the role of superhero to defeat him and win Roxanne. The action is just as exhilarating as Kung Fu Panda's, the humor is solid, and our beloved blue guy gets the best character development. The movie takes a typical superhero good versus evil plot and turns it into a masterful work of writing. What basically happened by the end of the movie, without giving spoilers, is that the supervillain became a superhero, the superhero became a regular citizen, and the regular citizen became the supervillain. Figure out which one is which. I find it insane that Tom McGrath directed both this and The Boss Baby. One movie is incredible while the other one is mediocre at best, which is quite a disparate contrast. But you wanna know what is not mediocre? The last movie on the list. And I think by now you have noticed how obvious or not obvious the choice became. 1. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Listen, the reason this is number 1 is not because of abrasive word of mouth, not because of recency bias, not because I want to blend in with the obnoxious fanboys, and certainly not because rating numbers on any website told me to. It's just legitimately that good. I'm disappointed that neither this or that other movie won an Annie or an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. Even if it was only nominated, you have to acknowledge the animation style they did, which is akin to that of Spider-Verse. Everyone can agree that this is the next step in the industry of animation, and we can only hope more studios decide to experiment with it. Another thing this movie gets a lot of praise for are the villains. Jack Horner is sadistic and irredeemable, and Death, straight up Death, is straight up terrifying. Perrito is a scrunkly looking dog. And how could you forget the classic DreamWorks trademark of throwing in fairy tale characters? This time they put Goldilocks and the Three Bears as main characters after they already did appear in Shrek 1. Everything else about this movie has already been said by many people. So if you somehow decided to watch a DreamWorks ranking video without first seeing this movie, you seriously need to revalue your life choices. Anyways, the old cat also reappears in this movie with the same Spider-Verse director reprising the role, and then he was also executive producer of Across the Spider-Verse. Fascinating. And that is it for today's video. Are you gonna be watching Trolls Band Together? Do you think The Boss Baby is the best movie of all time and hate me for putting it at the bottom? Let me know in the comments. I wanted to make this video for a long time, but 2023 has not been the best year for me, so I'm glad I finally gave myself the chance to do it now. I'm looking forward to making more of these videos on different filmographies in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.